What if I told you the tractors you're about to see are the last survivors of legendary companies that no longer exist? Machines built with sweat, steel, and pride, only to become their maker's final goodbye. From Soviet workhorses to American giants, these are the tractors that carried entire nations, yet marked the end of an era. Today we uncover the last tractors ever built by Dead Automakers between 1950 and 2025, and the stories behind their rise and fall will shock you. Number 1. Oliver 2255 1976. The Oliver 2255 is remembered by many farmers and collectors as one of the boldest tractors ever produced under the Oliver badge, and more importantly, as the last true Oliver before the brand disappeared into the folds of White Motor Corporation. Introduced in the mid-1970s, the 2255 was designed during a period when American farms were undergoing a transformation. With the consolidation of farmland and the rise of large-scale row crop operations, horsepower had become the new gold standard. Oliver needed something powerful and impressive to stay competitive against International Harvester's 1066 and John Deere's 4630. Their answer was the Oliver 2255. At the heart of the tractor was its most striking feature: a massive Caterpillar 3150 V8 diesel engine. Rated at around 145 horsepower, this was one of the few Oliver tractors to use an outsourced power plant from Cat, giving it raw pulling strength and an unmistakable engine note. Farmers who worked with it still remember the throaty roar of the V8 under load, which made it stand out in a field full of six-cylinder tractors. The 2255 was equipped with a partial power shift transmission, hydrostatic steering, and heavy-duty axles, making it well-suited for heavy tillage work. Visually, the tractor carried the bold Oliver green paint and a squared-off grille that made it look every bit as tough as it performed. However, the very feature that made it special, the big V8, also brought some headaches. Servicing the tractor was notoriously difficult because of how tightly the engine fit under the hood, and the Fiat 1550 itself had quirks that made maintenance less straightforward than Oliver's usual Waukesha diesels. Still, for many farmers, the brute strength of the 2255 made up for the hassle. By 1976, Oliver was no longer producing tractors under its own identity, with White rebranding future models. That made the 2255 not just another tractor, but a farewell performance from a company that had been building innovative machines since the late 1800s. Today, collectors treat the Oliver 2255 with reverence, often restoring them as showpieces. Its combination of muscle, uniqueness, and historical importance ensures it will forever remain the tractor that carried Oliver into history with a roar rather than a whisper. Number 2. Minneapolis Moline G1355. The Minneapolis Moline represents the end of an era for one of America's most innovative tractor companies. Minneapolis Moline, founded in the 1920s, was famous for introducing features that were ahead of their time, such as live PTOs and comfortable operator stations. But by the 1970s, the brand was struggling to remain competitive against giants like John Deere and International Harvester. G1355, introduced in 1972, was its final attempt to stay relevant before the company was fully absorbed by White. Under the hood, the G13055 packed an impressive 585 cubic inch six-cylinder diesel engine co-developed with Oliver. It produced roughly 140 horsepower, making it one of the most powerful tractors Minneapolis Moline had ever built. The tractor was designed for heavy tillage and large implements, giving it the pulling power that Midwestern farmers demanded. Its sheer torque allowed it to handle plows and cultivators that would have been unimaginable just a decade earlier. The G135 HAV also carried the brand's distinctive yellow and brown paint scheme, which made it visually stand out in the field. Mechanically, it borrowed heavily from Oliver designs due to the White Motor Corporation consolidating Oliver, Cockshut, and Minneapolis Moline into one family of tractors. As a result, many collectors call it a shared DNA tractor, part part Oliver. While some purists lamented the loss of independence, G1355 still embodied the power and innovation that Minneapolis Moline had always been known for. Unfortunately, the G1355 was both the peak and swan song for the brand. By 1972, Minneapolis Moline's identity was essentially gone, as tractors rolled off assembly lines bearing the new white livery instead. Surviving G1355s are now rare, and collectors treat them as prized possessions. They represent not just a powerful machine but the closing chapter of a company that had once shaped American tractor innovation. For many, the G1355 is less a tractor and more a symbol of Minneapolis Moline's final bow. Number 3. Cockshut 1850. Cockshut was Canada's pride in agricultural manufacturing, and its tractors were a common sight on Canadian farms from the 1920s onward. Based in Brantford, Ontario, Cockshut earned a reputation for rugged, practical designs that were tailored to the needs of Canadian farmers. But by the late 1960s, the company's independence was coming to an end. The Cockshut 1850, introduced in 1969, became one of the last tractors to bear the Cockshut badge before the company was absorbed into White. The Cockshut 1850 was essentially a rebadged Oliver 1850, but that did little to diminish its popularity in Canada. It was powered by a 6-cylinder diesel engine producing about 92 horsepower, which placed it in the mid-range category, perfect for the majority of farms in Ontario, Manitoba, and the Prairie provinces. It had the versatility to handle plowing, planting, and general farm chores, and it came with features like hydrostatic steering and optional cabs, which made it comfortable for operators during long hours in the field. What really gave the Cockshut 1850 an edge was local availability and dealer support. Canadian farmers valued buying from a Canadian company, even if the tractors were mechanically similar to their American Oliver counterparts. The 1850's red and white paint scheme also gave it a distinctive look compared to the green Oliver. By 1969, however, Cockshut's identity was being phased out, with tractors rebranded under the White name. That made the 1850 more than just another mid-sized tractor. It was the final standard-bearer of a brand that had represented Canadian ingenuity and independence for decades. Today, restored Cockshut 1850s are popular among collectors not only for their utility but also for their emotional significance. They remind Canadians of a time when their farms were powered by homegrown machinery that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the biggest American brands. Number 4. Allis-Chalmers 8070. Few tractors symbolize the decline of a great industrial giant as clearly as the Allis-Chalmers 8070. Allis-Chalmers was a household name in the US by the 20th century, producing everything from turbines and engines to construction equipment and tractors. In the agricultural world, it was especially famous for its WD series, D series, and later its 7000 series. But by the early 1980s, the company was struggling to keep pace with its rivals. The 8000 series, introduced in the mid-1980s, was its last great push into the high-horsepower market. The flagship of that line was the 8070, rated at about 170 horsepower thanks to a turbocharged 6-cylinder diesel engine. It wasn't just powerful, it was advanced. The tractor came with a power shift transmission, which allowed smooth shifting under load, giving operators more control and efficiency. The cab was designed with comfort in mind, including better sound insulation, adjustable seating, and climate control, features that rivaled John Deere's SoundGuard cabs and IH's custom interiors. Farmers who used the 8070 praised its balance of muscle and comfort. It had the horsepower to handle heavy implements while also reducing operator fatigue, something that became increasingly important as farms grew larger and days in the field became longer. Yet despite the engineering achievements, Allis-Chalmers was running out of time. Declining sales, mounting debts, and the farm crisis of the 1980s spelled doom. In 1985, the farm equipment division was sold to Deutz AG of Germany, marking the end of Allis-Chalmers tractors as Americans knew them. The 8070 thus became not just another tractor, but the last true Allis-Chalmers flagship. Collectors and farmers who preserve these machines see them as a poignant reminder of a company that once helped define American agriculture. In auctions and shows, the sight of an orange 8070 still stirs nostalgia for a time when Allis-Chalmers was a titan of industry. Number 5. International Harvester 5488. The International Harvester 5488 is perhaps one of the most symbolic tractors of all time. For decades, IH had been one of the dominant forces in American agriculture, producing legendary models like the Farmall H, the M, and the 1066. But by the 1980s, the company was in financial trouble. 5488, introduced in the early 1980s, became its final flagship tractor before IH's agricultural division was sold off to Tenneco, which merged it into what became Case IH. The 5488 belonged to the company's 50 series, which represented the cutting edge of IH design. With around 18.7 horsepower and a turbocharged DT460 6-cylinder diesel engine, it was built to take on the toughest row crop challenges. Farmers appreciated its pulling strength and its ability to handle large implements. The tractor was also fitted with IH's advanced transmission system, which, while innovative, could sometimes prove troublesome if not properly maintained. In many ways, 5488 represented both the peak and the decline of IH. It was powerful, stylish, and technologically ambitious, but it arrived during a turbulent era for the company. Just months after it rolled off the assembly line, IH's farm equipment division ceased to exist as an independent entity. The sale to Tenneco in 1985 officially ended the International Harvester brand in tractors, and Case IH was born. For enthusiasts and collectors, the 5488 holds enormous significance. It is not just another tractor, it is a piece of living history, representing the final chapter of a company that had shaped American agriculture for over a century. Restored 5488 often appear at farm shows, where they are admired not only for their mechanical power, but also for the story they tell, the story of how one of America's greatest tractor builders took its last stand. Number 6. Leyland 804. By the early 1980s, the proud story of Britain's tractor industry was reaching its twilight, and the Leyland 804 stood as one of the last machines to carry the Leyland badge. Leyland's tractors were the direct descendants of the Nuffield line, a British brand that had been founded in the 1940s to give farmers an affordable, locally made alternative to imports. When British Leyland took over, they rebranded Nuffield tractors under their own name in the late 1960s. For 2 decades, Leyland tractors served as reliable workhorses for small and medium-sized farms in the UK and across Europe. The Leyland 804, launched around 1982, offered a practical 80 horsepower from its 4-cylinder Perkins engine, a well-known and trusted power plant. This was the perfect fit for smaller farms in England, Scotland, and Ireland, where compact but capable tractors were essential for handling livestock duties, mowing, or cultivating fields too small for the massive machines favored in North America. With its stylish squared-off design, bright blue paint, and white cab, the 804 looked modern compared to its predecessors, signaling that Leyland was trying to keep up with international competitors like Massey Ferguson and Ford. Mechanically, Leyland 804 offered simple engineering, which was both a strength and a limitation. Farmers praised it for being easy to repair, with plenty of parts availability thanks to Perkins engines being so widely used. The cab offered reasonable comfort for the era, though it lacked the soundproofing and ergonomic luxuries that were becoming common in John Deere or Fendt models. Still, in the British countryside, Leyland 804 fit its environment perfectly, nimble enough for narrow lanes and smaller fields, but tough enough to plow and haul when needed. Unfortunately, the early 1980s farm crisis and the globalization of tractor production meant that Leyland's tractor division could no longer remain independent. In 1982, the company sold its tractor operations to Marshall Tractors, which rebranded the machines under their own name. That made the 804 the symbolic end of the line for Leyland-branded tractors. Today, surviving 804s are treasured by collectors and enthusiasts in Britain, not so much for their raw specifications but for their heritage. They embody a time when British farmers could buy locally made tractors with pride. Restorers often repaint and showcase them at vintage tractor rallies, where the Leyland 804 is remembered fondly as a machine that closed the book on one of the UK's most iconic tractor badges. Number 7. Steiger Panther KP-525. When it comes to sheer size and power, few tractors can match the Steiger Panther KP-525, a behemoth that rolled out in the mid-1980s. Steiger Tractor Inc., founded in the early 1950s by the Steiger brothers on a North Dakota farm, had revolutionized agriculture with its concept of the articulated four-wheel drive tractor. By designing tractors that could bend in the middle, Steiger allowed farmers to maneuver massive machines across wide fields while maintaining traction and power. Through the 1960s and 1970s, the distinctive lime green Steigers became synonymous with big acre farming across the US, Canada, and even parts of Australia. The Panther KP-525, as the name suggests, was a monster rated at 525 horsepower, powered by a Cummins KTA 150 engine, one of the largest engines ever put in a farm tractor. It was built for one purpose: to dominate the vast plains, pulling enormous air seeders, heavy chisel plows, and cultivators across thousands of acres. With its 4WD articulated chassis, massive tires, and unmatched torque, it was one of the most powerful production tractors of its era. Despite its engineering brilliance, the KP-525 came at a difficult time for Steiger. The farm crisis of the 1980s hit hard, and the demand for such ultra-large tractors shrank drastically. Many farmers were struggling to pay for existing equipment, let alone invest in cutting-edge giants like the Panther KP-525. Competition from Case, John Deere, and Versatile further squeezed Steiger's sales. In 1986, the inevitable happened. Steiger was acquired by Case IH, and its independent identity effectively ended. After the takeover, the trademark lime green paint scheme was replaced with Case's corporate red, and while the name Steiger continued in branding, the company was no longer the independent innovator it had once been. Collectors and large-scale farmers who still own Panther KP-525s often describe them as legends of brute force. They are not just tractors but engineering marvels. Machines that pushed the limits of what was possible in farm machinery before economics and consolidation reshaped the industry. For many enthusiasts, the Panther KP-525 represents the last roar of an independent Steiger before corporate ownership changed the game. Number 8. David Brown, 1690. Introduced in 1980, the David Brown 1690 was aimed at the upper end of the horsepower market, designed for farmers who needed more muscle to handle heavier implements and bigger fields. Rated at around 90-100 horsepower, it was equipped with a 6-cylinder diesel engine that gave it strong torque and excellent pulling ability. For mixed farms and arable operations, it offered a blend of reliability and performance that fit right into the demands of modern agriculture at the time. Farmers appreciated that the 1690 still carried David Brown's trademark straightforward design philosophy: simple to maintain, solidly built, and not over-engineered with features that were prone to failure. Visually, the tractor was classic David Brown, painted in the company's clean white and chocolate brown livery, with squared-off lines that reflected the design language of the era. The operator's station was also improved compared to earlier models, offering a more comfortable cab with decent visibility, better ergonomics, and noise insulation that made long days in the field more bearable. It wasn't luxurious by the standards of John Deere or Fendt, but for British farmers used to older, more Spartan machines, it was a welcome upgrade. Mechanically, the 1690 had much going for it. The 6-cylinder engine was both durable and easy to work on, and its power-to-weight ratio made it versatile enough for plowing, cultivating, or hauling duties. The tractor was offered with David Brown's Hydra Shift transmission, a semi-power shift system that allowed smoother gear changes without clutching. This feature made it more competitive with international rivals, though it also required careful maintenance, something that could trip up operators who weren't diligent. Still, in the hands of farmers who looked after their machines, the 1690 was a reliable workhorse that often clocked thousands of hours with minimal issues. Yet, despite its qualities, the 1690 arrived at a time when David Brown as a company was struggling to survive. The global tractor industry in the late 1970s and early 1980s was consolidating rapidly. Giants like John Deere, International Harvester, and Massey Ferguson dominated global sales, while rising European brands like Fendt and Fiat were competing aggressively. Smaller independent makers like David Brown found it increasingly difficult to keep pace with the scale, technology, and marketing power of these multinational corporations. By 1972, David Brown had already been acquired by Tenneco, the same American company that would later own Case. For a while, tractors continued to be built under the David Brown name at the Meltham Mills factory in Yorkshire, but the writing was on the wall. The 1690, launched in 1980, became one of the final new models developed under the David Brown identity before Tenneco rebranded the line as Case David Brown. By 1983, the David Brown name was being phased out entirely, replaced by Case tractors. The proud Yorkshire brand that had once been a symbol of British farming independence was effectively gone. That's what makes the 1690 so significant. It wasn't just another tractor. It was the last true David Brown, carrying the DNA of decades of British engineering before the company's identity was swallowed up by corporate consolidation. Farmers who bought them at the time may not have realized it, but they were driving the closing chapter of an era. Today, surviving 1690s are highly prized by collectors, especially in the UK. Restored models often appear at vintage tractor rallies, where they stand as reminders of a company that once punched far above its weight. For many enthusiasts, the sight of that white and brown paint scheme brings back memories of a time when British tractors could proudly stand toe-to-toe with the American giants. The David Brown 1690 may not have been the most powerful tractor of its era, nor the most advanced, but it carries a unique historical weight. It represents the end of Britain's most iconic independent tractor brand, a machine that worked hard in the fields while quietly marking the close of a great chapter in agricultural history. Number 9. Versatile 1150, 1984. Canada's versatile brand earned legendary status in North America for its rugged, no-nonsense articulated tractors. Known for their simplicity and reliability, versatile tractors became staples on the Canadian prairies and U.S. wheat fields, where farmers needed machines capable of pulling heavy implements across vast acres of land. Among the many models it produced, the versatile 1150, introduced in 1984, stands out as one of the most powerful and ambitious. Under its hood sat a Cummins KTA-15T diesel engine, the same powerhouse used in Steiger's KP-525, delivering a massive 470 horsepower. This was a tractor designed for serious farming operations, wheat growers, and large-scale grain producers who needed brute force to cover thousands of acres quickly. The versatile 1150 was a workhorse, with its articulation allowing remarkable maneuverability for a machine of its size. Farmers loved its straightforward engineering, no unnecessary complexity, just raw power and reliability. However, the mid-1980s farm crisis hit Canada just as hard as the US, and demand for such massive machines shrank. Many smaller farmers couldn't justify the purchase of a giant like the 1150, and even large operators hesitated in the uncertain economic climate. Versatile, despite its strong reputation, struggled to stay afloat as an independent company. In 1987, Ford acquired Versatile, rebranding the tractors under its own corporate umbrella. This meant that the Versatile 1150 was one of the last machines to carry the original identity of the brand before corporate ownership changed its trajectory. Today, the 1150 is admired not only for its size and performance, but also for what it represents, the high watermark of independent Canadian tractor manufacturing. Restored examples are celebrated at farm shows, and in the field some still work as dependable giants. For many, the Versatile 1150 is the tractor that best captures the boldness and ambition of Versatile before it lost its independence. Number 10. Fiat 180-90. Italy's Fiat Trattori was once one of the largest tractor manufacturers in the world, producing durable, affordable machines that were exported to Europe, Africa, and beyond. Fiat tractors were known for their rugged simplicity and reliability, making them especially popular in Mediterranean countries where farming conditions could be tough. The Fiat 180-90, introduced in 1984, represented one of the company's last major milestones before it restructured and was eventually absorbed into the multinational corporation that became Case New Holland, CNH. The 1890 was rated at 180 horsepower, powered by a robust 6-cylinder diesel engine. It was designed for larger European farms, especially in Italy, Spain, and France, where medium to large tractors were increasingly in demand during the 1980s. With its striking Fiat orange paint scheme, squared-off cab, and strong hydraulics, 180-90 was both visually distinctive and practically effective. Farmers valued its balance of power, fuel efficiency, and reliability. The tractor also symbolized Fiat's ambition to compete in the higher horsepower markets dominated by John Deere, Fendt, and Massey Ferguson. But while it succeeded in many ways, Fiat was already in the process of merging and restructuring its agricultural operations. By the late 1980s, Fiat had consolidated into Fiat Agri, and within a decade, it was part of CNH alongside Case and New Holland. This meant that the 1890 was among the last tractors to wear the Fiat badge proudly on its hood. Even today, the Fiat 180/90 is remembered fondly across Europe. Many are still in use, a testament to their durability, while others have become collector's items, lovingly restored to showcase their bold design. For enthusiasts, the 80/90 stands as the final great Fiat tractor, a machine that closed the chapter on one of Europe's most respected independent tractor brands. Every one of these tractors wasn't just a machine, it was a final chapter in history. Some ended with a whisper, some with a roar, but all of them left a legacy that farmers and collectors will never forget. Which of these final tractors do you think deserves the title of the greatest last stand? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you love stories of forgotten machines, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and join me for more deep dives into the past of agriculture's toughest legends. Until next time, keep the engines running and the history alive.